Okay, in this video I'm going to be trying to make a small demo of this project rethread that Codex has been making and I've been occasionally giving some input to. My mic is very terrible on this laptop, so I've had to crank it to 20 decibels, I think. So hopefully it's like somewhat audible. First you just clone the repo. To compile it, you run make. It creates a binary and a second binary in this build directory. I've made an alias pretty much, or just like a wrapper script of rethread by itself. So you can see cat which rethread. It just runs the same original binary and forwards any arguments. So I'll be testing with this. You have a help menu. It's a browser, so it has browser related features. You can launch an instance of it using the browser command. And I'm considering moving this to just be like the default if you just run rethread by itself, but for now it's fine to have a help menu. It's kind of more discoverable, I think. Now this shows up. This is not like a special page made in Qt. It's just the browser open to a website, where that website is the one I'm writing right here. So you could visit this in a regular browser and it'd look the same. It just has some JS and like some HTML for typing into here. So if you put in like x.com, it changes to visit, and now pressing enter would just use JS to redirect me to X. And then if I just type something random and press enter, then it uses Google to search it, and another redirect. Now rethread, you can see first that is kind of different because it has no UI. That's by design, because I think in regular browsers the UI, which is mainly this bar at the top with the URL and then some buttons, just takes up a lot of space and makes it look disgusting, and it just feels really bad to use it. There's just no reason you'd subject yourself to that, especially when Qt browser already kind of solves this. It lets you disable the tab bar and then only show it while you're switching tabs. So we try to take a similar philosophy here, but ideally we'd be slightly more configurable and extensible. So to do that, first I can, I guess, show some of the default key bindings. Here by itself, I'm pressing Control plus Tab. It's showing up with this. Then I'll press Control plus T. Now this spawned a second tab. Again, there's no like default blank page to type like a URL into. It's just, it loads to this. And then I can press Control plus Tab to switch between them. And it also shows up this little window, which is like the list of tabs. I think it looks like fairly clean enough. And in the center it's just easier to see, but in the future we might make this more configurable. Like ideally you would just have a very generic interface, like how notify send implementations usually do it. Like if I do notify send hello, it just displays here. This I think is using the Wayland Mako program, and it lets you configure like the font and where on the screen it shows up. I don't know if we need to go exactly that far with the font, but yeah, it'd be good if we could spawn like a custom message anywhere for X amount of time, or just forever. That'd be like a more general visual interface. So that happens, and then there are a few other bindings like Control Shift Tab and Control W to close a tab. And I think the interesting thing here is that none of these bindings are like directly written in C++ to implement that specific feature. Instead, there's a more general binding system that maps arbitrary key input in the browser to specific commands that you decide on. This mirrors the kind of binding system that I think like Cocoon definitely has it, NeoVim I'm pretty sure has it. Qt Browsers is very similar too, which is I guess more declarative programmatically. Whereas for something like the Brave browser, you'd have to go into the GUI settings, and then you have like a few actions you can make, like binding Control plus T to, I don't know, print the current page or something. But you wouldn't be able to make it like send an email automatically or reboot your computer or anything like that. So it's very limiting, and you feel like you're a prisoner when you use Brave. That's why people are switching away. So the way we implement that here is through a startup script. If I close rethread browser and show the help menu, nope. There are a few things you can change, like the URL that opens by default, and you can see there's the default right there. But then there's also this startup script. By default it runs this, but just to make it a bit easier, I'm going to use this one right from util. So startup script equals this, and this will have the same effect for now because this is the same one I was using in my config. But now we can edit it and refresh, or just run the commands directly live. So here's the script. Let's move that, and then here. So first it sets this variable peak. That's just like a bit of a helper. This is like some config for the right click. You can kind of ignore that for now. The interesting things are here is that it's using different rethread commands, so bind in this case, and these commands can be run from anywhere. This is literally just like it's running this shell script. It has almost zero special rethread specific logic, except that it sets this variable rethread user data directory equal to whatever flag you passed for your user data directory. So that's like if you have multiple browser profiles, you can use separate ones. And then this script uses this like e variable to automatically make it so every future binding you're making maps to that specific profile directory. I might explain that further later, but so you have this rethread bind command. You can also look at the help menu here. You basically just specify what kind of key you want to target, and then you pass in a command that you want to run on that key. So in this case it's running with Control and T, and then it runs the command rethread tabs open, which is just the generic way to open a tab, and then it's pointing it at this specific URL. So that's why when I press Control T, it's opening this same URL every time. If I had a different value here, then that's what would open. So this specific homepage is barely considered special. It's only special in that it's the default if you don't specify a URL for when you open the browser. But besides that, if you didn't have this binding Control T, then there'd be no other use cases for it in the code. Like there would just be zero way to open a new tab with a key binding. You could still use tabs open yourself from the terminal, but then you'd specify your own URL. If you just run it by itself, it doesn't even consider this one a default either. And yeah, so internally there's zero way to run this tabs open logic. It's just exposed through the CLI, which means that all of the startup config is like very similar, pretty much identical logic to what you would use if you were trying to automate this from an external script. Like maybe you want to have your email fetcher run periodically, and then if you receive an email from one specific person, it filters for that and then runs a tab open automatically. Stuff like that should be very easy, I think. But it's, I mean, in Brave you can kind of do that. You can do Brave URL here. That specific thing of opening a tab is easy, but other things like closing a tab or switching tabs would require you to use the CDP, I think. What did it stand for? Chrome Debug Protocol, I think. Or it might be a DevTools protocol. One of those. And yeah, you can write a helper for that, but in general it's going to take like some manual logic of finding a port and sending data over a WebSocket. So out of the box you don't get as clean of an interface. Here it's very simple. So you have Control Tab. This uses the cycle command to cycle through the tabs. Obviously you could run this yourself. So you don't even need to use these bindings. Theoretically you could use like a separate like hotkey daemon, like SXHKD, I think. Yeah, is what I used to use on X11. Or like Hyperland has its own binding manager. So you could map like super plus T on your system, and then it would always just spawn a tab here. But I personally think this is pretty good because it means you can use a bunch of these bindings for free and not worry about overlap with other programs, because they're specific to when you're like actively focused on this window. Yeah, so there's just some default bindings. You have cycling through tabs, forward and backwards. You have going forward and backwards in history. Here you have closing the tab. And after each of these, I have this peek running, which just uses this tab strip that you saw, this thing, and then tells it to open, show for 750 milliseconds, and then close. You could also do something like tab strip show, and then now it's just there forever. Although this would currently get disabled because my bindings would run peek, and that would force an open, then wait, then close it. So you'd have to rebind these to not include the peek. So I can use something from the terminal, like rethread tabs cycle 1. Tabs. There, and you saw that it updates this highlighted part to show the active tab without doing any kind of peek. Then there's so here's like another example of something interesting you can do that I think Qt Browser does have natively, but Brave doesn't, which is opening a tab based on your clipboard. So I can run like google.com, copy that, now I can paste it, and then now I use Alt-Shift-P, and then it opens, because it just runs this command which checks my clipboard using Wayland paste, and then it just runs. And then here for Alt-P without Shift, it just uses JS and this rethread eval command to do a redirect. So I can do the same thing, like here I have 4 tabs open, Alt-P. Uh-oh, what happened? Why did it try to load this? Okay, I see. It's using the same thing every time. That probably means that this, I had that string copied at startup, and then this loaded into this string. So basically I didn't escape this properly. I have to do another one right here, I think. Let's try that again. Now try Alt P to 3. No. Now it has this ish. It thinks it's literal. Okay, something is weird with these quotes. How come this one works? It's probably because, I don't know, can we just do this? I'm not very familiar with shell coding semantics of like single quotes versus double quotes. I know if you have like foo equals bar, then this won't work. This will be literal. Did I quote this right? Let's try it again. Then copy Google. What? Unexpected token? Now that means that the JavaScript like isn't run anything. Oh wait, in Java, could you do this? This work? This might work. Okay, yeah, so before it would execute that entire thing, and it would run the echo, and the echo had single quotes, right? So it's executing with single quotes, and inside that shell, WL paste was in single quotes. Now here, this is all in double quotes. I think this should work as long as this works. And it does. So hopefully. Make sure this is copied. Okay, now that runs. Now the question is if we try something else like example.com, then I'm pressing Alt P again. So just here. No. Now again it ran. Oh yeah, because now it runs from here. Then maybe one more escape right there. Example.com, and now Google. Yep. Okay. That works. Fix Alt P coding. Okay. That's not the best experience, but you could solve this pretty easily if you just did like key P and then bind this to a Python script and then do it inside Python. I could easily tell codex and it one-shot that. This is just like, happens to be that I wanted to do it manually. Okay, that's that. What else? Here I have some links for like GitHub. Now as a demo I can try implementing like a refresh. That's something that is generally good to have in browsers. So first let's see if we can trigger a refresh at all. And maybe in the future we'll do this natively, but I think for now JS just works. I think it's window.location.reload, rethread eval, read from standard in. Okay, and there it refreshed as expected. So now all we have to do is make a binding for this. So rethread bind alt key R, because I like alt, and then to this. Okay, now I scroll around, and when I want to refresh, there. Should work in here. Yeah. And now I'll just put that into the startup script as well, and also add a control. Okay. Now, for example, we could add like a useful feature in Qt browser is to be able to yank so copy the current URL. To do this, we can use the tabs list feature or command. You can see it gives you some JSON of the current tabs. So first we need to get the URL of the current tab, and you can tell based on this flag active. So tabs list, we can use JQ and then read tabs. Then we have to filter it. We use select, and then active equals true. Then this thing that we have selected, we have to access .url on it. Does this work? Okay, this worked. Okay, let's do this then. And then we have to put JQ in raw mode. Okay, that gets the current, and then we just have to copy it. So I already have this clip program I made a while ago. What was in here again? We just use WL copy. Okay. So it's just going to be WL copy. Can do that later. C1L. Okay. WL copy. Put this entire thing in there, and now we have the current URL. Now we copy that entire thing, put it into here, and copy URL, put it under the same block, rethread bind alt key Y, E here, so we're gonna wanna do this, and this is fine to leave as a single quote, and I think this should work. Now we could restart the browser, or I can just run it. Now I'm gonna go to like example, and there it's copied. Rethread, copied. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of philosophy I like to have for software, where it's just like very simple to configure, and you can write any other programs you want to interact with this that easily reuses these same commands. What other ones did I have? You can unbind keys if you want. You can modify this tab strip. Yeah, this is where it'd be nice if we had a more general like UI interface. Like the interface for managing the UI. Right now the tab strip just shows your list of tabs, but it should be theoretically kind of general. This thing is just like a square with some text in it, so surely you could just put it somewhere else. So it'd be cool here if we just had like a command that draws somewhere at the bottom, like URL copied, exclamation mark, smiley face emoji, knife emoji, and then it stays there for like 1 second, then closes. Then the last thing that I had recently was